All right. Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to let you know that this webinar is recorded, and so we'll send out a copy of the webinar afterwards. And the second is in the chat section of the Microsoft Teams webinar, there's a place for you to send a message. So if you have any questions whatsoever during the webinar, please put a note there, and I'll try my best to address it. With that, we'll get started. So first of all, my name is Hai. I'm co-founder of Affluent, which is the company behind Matrix. So hopefully you're here today because you're looking at ways to become more effective at prioritizing your task and managing your emails. And so my goal is pretty simple. I want to help you understand the basics of Matrix, the software, the fundamentals behind it, help you understand the framework so that you can get the most out of Matrix with the least work. As I understand, Matrix has so many capabilities. At the end of the day, what matters most is that you get value out of Matrix, which means that when you use Matrix on a daily basis, you walk away knowing that you're working on the right things and that you actually have peace of mind, for lack of better words. And then thirdly, help you envision what your work and life success may look like with Matrix. That's one of the reason for the software to exist, which is to actually help individuals such as yourself become more effective and more efficient at what it is that you do. One of the things I'd like to talk about first is are the challenges that our customer face. The reason I'm bringing it up is because I want to show that you're not unique in terms of the challenges that you face. And so if there's any problems or prioritization challenges that you and your team constantly run up against, ironically, it's one of those things that continue to impact all of us. And so team members have significant trouble understanding what's priority right now. And one of the things that's really interesting about this is that more so than ever before, we're working with other people, we're working across multiple projects. And so it's extremely difficult to know what should I work on at any point in time. And the corollary to that is actually having trouble keeping track on the status of work across all these areas of responsibilities. And then thirdly, we're facing actually far too much context switching. So ironically, over the last couple of years, we have so much more technology around communication software such as Microsoft Teams, Slack, and then all these email stuff that's happening. And more so than ever, I experience this myself, which is I have to constantly switch between all these different applications, all these different software in order to know what it is that I need to work on. And so that context switching is actually at the core of the problems that a lot of us face. So what is Matrix? Matrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software. What we do is we help both teams and individuals manage emails, conduct more efficient meeting, and get real-time status and updates on critical projects and priorities. So at the core of Matrix, it's around understanding what you need to work on at any point in time. So I call Matrix a communication software instead of just a project management software. And when I say communication software, what I mean by that is that it helps you communicate your priorities to others and then helps others communicate your priorities to you. And so hopefully in today's webinar and the product demonstration, I can show you that capability and why it matters. So how does Matrix help with these challenges that we talked about? We use something called the 4-quadrant methodology, and I'll go into more details to promote very effective prioritization. So if you use Matrix, you should always understand exactly what matters most at any point in time. And then secondly, Matrix provide different views, such as the one-on-one, the agenda, the timeline, to help you understand what needs to be done within the right context. And when I say context, it means what matters at this moment in time. So it's really interesting because we talk about goals and so forth. And there are things that are far reaching, right? The things that are months or years out. But then there are things that are happening right now. And then the things that you're doing for people. And so when I say context, it means the context of time, the context of priorities, the context of people. And then thirdly, Matrix provide really deep integrations into systems you already use inside Microsoft Teams and Outlook. And so that's actually where we're probably the most integrated solution in Teams and Outlook. And actually, we're super excited about several additional integrations that we have within the Microsoft Enterprise. So if you are an enterprise customer of Matrix, we actually were just announced by the Microsoft CEO around our integrations within Party Matrix into the Copilot system. So if you do use that, reach out to us if you have any questions, and we can show you actually how to implement and activate that capability. So what makes Party Matrix better? The first reason is that Party Matrix is Microsoft 365 security certified across our Teams app, Outlook app, and web app. And we're the only solution that I'm aware that has all three certifications. And then we're using AI to help you achieve your goals. And I think there's a lot of places where we can implement AI and a lot of places where AI might do good or not so, being not so capable in all of this, but we're trying our best to learn from that. And so we're constantly seeking feedback. So as I show you some of these functionality, if there's any feedback that you have around where we can actually add value to you, please bring it up. And then Party Matrix provide what I call people-centric collaboration. And that's what we do in the one-on-one view. So it's not just about projects, right? Because you always want to understand, okay, this is what I need to work on. But what if I need to understand, what do I need to work on from my manager or from my colleague or from my client or for my family? And then finally, Party Matrix is available as a standard solution, which is what I'll be talking today, as well as a HIPAA compliant for healthcare life sciences, as well as an Azure government cloud for local and state government. We also have enterprise deployments, of course. So if you have any questions around those, please feel free to reach out to us. So what makes Party Matrix effective? There's a couple of things. One, it helps you understand what you need to do right now. And that was such an interesting aspect around all of these prioritization software or project management software or task management software. You probably, I mean, if the reason why you're here today is probably because you're looking for a better way to understand what you need to work on. And if that's the case, what are the challenges that you face with your current method, right? And typically the problem is, I don't know what to do at this moment in time. And then what do I need to do later? As in, what do I need to do next? And then what are the things I should delegate? And then finally, what are the things I should not even do? And understanding that is half the battle. We often struggle so much working on things that don't matter. And how many times has it been where you worked on something and maybe you worked even real hard on it, you got the deliverable, and no one cares? And I hate to say it, but it happens more often than not. You know, people work on these presentation and reports and so forth, and no one reads them because it doesn't matter. And that's the fascinating thing around all of this, is that our society is pushing people to work on work just for the sake of work, as opposed to work that matters. And so when it comes to Party Matrix, unfortunately, we can't solve those problems for you, but at least what we do is we surface it up. So then when you talk to your manager or your colleagues or your direct reports or your executives, you're in alignment, and that's the key. Finally, Party Matrix helps you with understanding the constantly shifting priorities. And so it offers one place where everyone can go to understand what needs to be done. And so what I'm trying to convey is that Party Matrix starts at you as the individual, understanding your priorities, and then afterward taking that and actually sharing with everybody else, so then everyone can come together. So let's talk about the core fundamental behind Party Matrix. So there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." What I really like about this quote is that it actually teases everything we do into the two dimensions of importance and urgency, right? If you have a list, I imagine you have a list of things you have to do. Where do you start? Do you start at the top or do you start at the bottom? Or do you start somewhere in the middle? Is it random? And I think that's what we kind of do a lot of times, which is we kind of stumble on whatever's easiest, right? And so by looking at it from a different perspective, which is importance and urgency, then we can determine, what are the things I need to work on that's important, but it's also urgent? And what are the things that's important, but not urgent, so that I can start planning for it? And then what are the things I can actually get rid of? Because if it's something that's not important and not urgent, I hope you're not even looking at it, right? And actually, in fact, why even have it on your list? Why clutter yourself? Let's get rid of it completely. And so that's what I really like about this quote. And so instead of having all your tasks and all your action items and all your goals and all the things that you're doing in a single list, what we do is we split into the quadrants. And so in Party Matrix, everything that you have to, every task that you create in a project has to fit within the 2x2 matrix framework. The most fundamental framework that we have is what's called the do now, plan, delegate, and inbox. So what that means is that the tasks that are important and urgent goes in quadrant 1, the do now. The tasks that are important but not urgent are the things you should be planning for. And then the things that are urgent but not important, the stuff you can delegate. So by delegate, it means what are the things that somebody else can do a better job than you? So you have a core competency, whatever that is. And with that core competency, you're the best at executing that, right? And so whatever our roles is, but then there are some cases where somebody else can do a better job. I like to draw the analogy of going to a restaurant for the purpose that it's not like you can't cook it or cook food or whatever, but it's something you want to delegate to somebody else because they can do a better job than you at that, or you just don't want to spend the resources for it because it's not important and urgent. So that's sort of like delegating that task, the cooking aspect to somebody else. But you can think of it in the same context within the work that you have to do. And that is why there are executive assistants. And that is why there are other people that you report to people and then people reporting to you. And finally, instead of having anything that's not important and not urgent in your list at all, we change that to the inbox. And so the inbox is the place where all your tasks might start. And then from there, they have to fit within the other spectrum, the do now, the plan, and the delegate. Now, a couple of things. One, this is not easy. I want to make that point up front because Party Matrix does not solve all these problems for you around executing. What it does is it just helps you bring clarity to your day. So imagine if you did this exercise where you take all the tasks that you have to do, you put into this 2x2 matrix. So now you suddenly have all your goals and all your priorities down on a piece of paper, perhaps. Then take that piece of paper and go around the office and start comparing notes. Go to your manager, ask him, hey, by the way, these are my priorities. Do you agree? Right? What would you change? And then the same thing, look at your manager's priorities and is there agreement? Are the things that you're doing pushing towards that goal? And then vice versa, if you go to your direct reports, are they working on the things that you consider important? And the idea here is that a lot of times all of these priorities are within our head, but we're actually not writing it down. We're not actually doing the note comparison aspect of it, right? And so we're just blindly working on things. And so the goal of Party Matrix is to create that alignment from the very beginning. So then when you go into your meeting or when you're working on something, you know that whatever it is that you work on, the stuff in quadrant 1 is exactly aligned with everyone else within the organization. Now, I'm spending a lot of time talking about this right here because it is so important. Because our thesis is if you're working real hard on the wrong things, it won't matter. But if you're doing the right things right, that's where all the value is. So the 4-quadrant Eisenhower Matrix create alignment from the very beginning, and that's the hardest part, and that's most of the work. And so the one thing that's not so obvious is that success from using Party Matrix, using our software, isn't necessarily about finding what everyone agrees on. Because look, if your organization agrees on everything and you go around and you compare notes and everyone knows exactly what it is they need to work on and all the goals are perfectly aligned, I don't think you need our software. In fact, you don't need any software whatsoever. You can just go and execute. But success from using Party Matrix is about finding disagreement, right? And that misalignment. And so hopefully when you walk away from this webinar and you start using the Party Matrix software and you're writing down your task and then you go and compare notes with your team, that from that moment you start identifying all the stuff that's actually misaligned. And if you just can do that one time, I guarantee you that you feel like the value of Party Matrix has been delivered. So I do want to remind everyone that the webinar is recorded and we'll post a webinar here afterwards. And then if you have any feedback whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to me, hi@affluence.com, or our support. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the demo of the product itself. And if there are questions, please send them in the chat and I will review them and I'll try my best to address them. Okay, now with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up my Party Matrix. And here I have the web app. So a couple of notes. One, Party Matrix works on iPhone, Android, web app, inside Teams, inside Outlook, desktop, and so forth. So what that means is that Party Matrix is there no matter what platform you're on. So here I show the web app, which is our recommended standard place where you should be using Party Matrix. So to get to the web app, you go to our website, affluence.com, and then click on web app. Or you go to partymatrix.com. Now, when you open Party Matrix, let me talk about the most valuable thing about Party Matrix, which is front and center, the quadrant. So if there were no other features that you use in Party Matrix, except for the quadrant, that's good enough, right? That's good enough for me at least. And so On my left-hand side here, I have my list of projects. And so you can think of projects as areas, responsibilities, things that you need to do. They could be goals. They could be your task list, right? It could be your personal task list. It could be your team task list. It could be an initiative you're working on. It could be your quarterly goals, et cetera. So you can think of projects as being that full spectrum of things that are themselves associated with each of these four quadrants. So when I have a project selected, the four quadrants show up here. And as you can see, the naming of these quadrants is very similar to what I showed you in the presentation. Quadrant 1, the do now, the quadrant 2, do later, quadrant 3, delegate, and quadrant 4 is inbox. So when I create a task in Matrix, I have to choose which of these quadrants does it belong in. So for example, let's say I want to go and say follow up with webinar participants. Okay, so this is just a basic task, something I have to do. Now, one of the things that works well in Matrix is I can just type the due date directly in the conversation, in the item name itself. So I'm going to say due tomorrow, 10 a.m. So when I do something like that, what happens is Matrix will create a task for me, and then it understands that due tomorrow, 10 a.m. means tomorrow at 10 a.m. And so the due date is set for me. Now I have my task created. So one thing, again, that's different is that you can think of this as your task list, and your task list could be, again, that list, top to the bottom. So the difference is it starts here in the inbox. And then if I look at this and I was like, you know what, this is actually important and urgent, I can actually just drag it. So when I start my day tomorrow morning, I can take a look at this and know exactly where I need to focus my time, which is the top left, right? And something that's actually not so important or what I need to plan for later, I can just drag and drop to another quadrant. Now, when I select a task, on the right-hand side, the item details pop up. And so the item details is where you can add additional information to the task itself. Now, if you use task management software already, then you know there's a lot of basic stuff that always exists. So for example, the owner, the progress, the due dates. There's one thing that I like about Matrix, which is there's something called the reminders. And reminders different from due dates. So for example, let me give you something that I do all the time. I get an email from a customer, and then within that email, maybe I can't respond right away, right? So I'm going to say due in 2 weeks or something like that. But then afterwards, I want to make sure that I actually get started or review it prior. So then I want a reminder on a weekly basis. So here's how it works in Matrix. You see how, let's just say, I'm going to say follow up with customer A due in 2 weeks, okay? So now that task is created, it's due in 2 weeks, but I'm going to go at the bottom here. I'm going to say remind me weekly. So what I've done is actually I've asked Matrix to remind me on a constant basis until I get this task done. And the reason I bring this up is because the reminder aspect is what helps you work on those right tasks. And let me give you an example why. The reason why we get so distracted is because the urgent things come back to bite us, right? Example. This morning, I open my email. I get a couple hundred emails per day, and then I see my emails, and then I'm like, oh, this is something I need to look at. But really, it's not that important. But it's just the last email in, and therefore I look at it. And so we are constantly pulled by these urgent things that are not important. So how do we solve that problem? We solve that problem by actually ensuring that the important things actually come to our attention. And so that's what the reminders is for. So when you have an important task and you have a due date, great. When the due date comes, you'll see that. But by setting reminders, it actually pops back up into your alerts constantly. And that is how we overcome this problem to ensure that we actually work on the right things. So my pro tip for you as you use Matrix is, again, when you create a task, put in the appropriate quadrants, right? That's obvious. Set a due date and then set a reminders. Every single task that you have. If you do those three things that I just mentioned, I think you get 80% of the value out of Matrix because it ensures that you're prioritizing, and it ensures that you're actually going to do those things that you said you would do. Going to the item details further, there's several things you can do that you can add that I think is actually pretty good features inside Matrix. For example, you can actually star a task. And so what starring a task means is that it actually surfaces it and pushes to the top of the list, whatever quadrant it may be. And if you star a task, you can actually get a star report. So on a daily basis or a weekly basis, you can get a report in your email that describes the status updates on all these tasks that are starred. Pretty useful if you have a team, and as a manager, you assign a task to your coworker, and then you want to get a status update on a routine basis on all these tasks that are starred, especially the tasks that are behind schedule, right? And so starring ensures that you get that extra visibility. And then the next thing you can do is you can add icons. So, these are pretty basic icons. I've seen pretty good successes from customers that use these different colors. So for example, red, yellow, and green. At the very basic level, you can think of them as a way to just make it visual that something is on task. So for example, you make it green, you see how it shows up here as a green icon. And so then you can take a look at your dashboard, your matrix, and see, okay, I have these, 5 tasks that are green, 3 tasks that are yellow, and 2 tasks that are red. And so just for yourself, it's helpful, but for a team, it's even more helpful. But you can go ahead and change this as needed. And then also you can sort by icons and all that. So that's what makes the color coding very, very helpful. And then there's next to that, you have owner. And so in Matrix, there's always at least one owner for a task. And you can't have multiple, maybe I'll get to rephrase that. There can be at most one owner for a task. So you cannot have a task with multiple owners. And the reason for that is that there needs to be clear delineation on who is responsible. And so if you have a task and you assign to somebody, their avatar will show up here. You can upload your pictures and so forth. But if you're interested in following the task, or if there's other stakeholders, then you can add them as followers, right? So for example, I can click on this and then I add additional people as followers. So now Eugenia has a follower in this task. And so when this task is updated, then Eugenia will also get an update. And so the whole goal around ensuring that you work on the right things is that the right things are actually, again, surface up to your alerts. So then you are aware of those changes. And then the corollary to that is that the things that aren't important, don't set these due dates. Don't assign it to people. Don't delegate to people and so forth. And so that's how you reduce the noise that you have. And so one of the things that I recommend with Matrix is if you're new to the software, and you're worried about getting overwhelmed with too many things, use Matrix to track only the most important thing that you have to do, right? Your monthly or quarterly goals. And now from those goals, make sure you set the due dates and so forth. But then whenever you use Matrix, you go in, you're like, okay, am I working on the right things or not? Now, for me personally, I have something like 300 projects. And so you can see how in my real account, I have a lot of different projects. And so with that, I have tens of thousands of action items of task. But Matrix is designed to handle all of that. And Matrix is designed to surface up what matters despite having all that. So that's the one thing that you can sort of walk away, feeling comfort about, which is Matrix works well if you have 5 things, and Matrix works well if you have 5,000 things in it. And not only that, we keep a record of all the changes for you. So then when you're ready to review things that you did last month, last quarter, 2 years ago, that were assigned to, person A or person B, Matrix can actually generate all of those and surface all that up for you regardless. So it's extremely helpful as you use Matrix more and more, that it builds up these knowledge of all the things that's happening within the organization. And then not only that, you have it all structured from the perspective of priorities, right? Because how often has it happened where, you're trying to figure out whether or not your coworker thinks something's important? It is so difficult because you're not inside their brain. But by using Matrix and by making it so visual and so easy to see, you're always on the same page. And that's the point. Now, as you scroll down further, you can see that this is the chat section. So the chat section was where I typed that remind me weekly, but really it's a place, it serves 2 other purposes. First, it's a place where you can have communication within the context of this task. And when I say the context of this task, what I mean is if you have a meeting or if you are talking to somebody in the hallway about different tasks, guess what? There's no record of that conversation. And so later, if someone else chimes in or someone else comes into the task, they won't know what's been discussed. So the whole point of the chat within the Matrix task is that you have this conversation, but only within the context of that task. And so then later on, if you review this particular task, you know what was discussed, what were the changes and so forth. The second purpose of this is it provides you a history. And so with Matrix, you can actually print a record of every single one of these conversation within every single item. And the nice thing about it is that it's there for you for years into the future. And so let me give you an example. Let's just say if you have a particular task and it was done 2 years ago, and now you're trying to go and review and say, wait a minute, why did we make those changes again? Who was responsible? What were the status across that? Well, Matrix provide you that full history, and you can go and review that. Now, of course, customers in the highly regulated space actually leverage this. We have a customer, for example, where they actually have to get things done on a certain date by a certain time because of regulations. And so Matrix provide a record of that for them. So they can prove, okay, this task was done by so-and-so on these dates. And so you can think of this as a place where it can provide that rich history. And the other thing I really like about it is it helps a lot with employee onboarding, as well as helping manage priorities of the employees who leave your organization. I mean, we know that employee turnover is always a big challenge. If your employee leaves, how do you know what are the things that you need to take over or assign to somebody else? And so with Matrix, you know exactly what are the tasks that need to be delegated, and then also you know exactly what a status update of it at any point in time. So next to that, you have the notes section. So this is intended to a place for you to put subtasks, but also the basic notes. If you need fancy notes, that's what Google Docs or that's what Microsoft Word is for, right? Matrix is not designed for that. But you can go ahead and type some notes here. And then finally, you have the resources section. So in the resource section is where you're going to attach files or emails, or you can link to other Matrix tasks. So for example, let's just say follow up with customer A due in 2 weeks. What I can do is I can link to another Matrix task, right? So I'm going to choose something that's very simple. So if I click on this plus right here, it'll link the task. But what I can also do is I can actually set dependencies. So I can say that this task is blocked by this task. And what happens now is that you've just linked tasks together. And so if you are a project manager and you love Gantt charts and timeline view and so forth, and say this build dependencies, that's how you do it in Matrix. But the whole point of the resource section is actually to add other information that helps you accomplish this task, whatever that might be. So in a little bit, I'm going to show you how to prioritize email, which is probably one of the biggest reasons why customers come to Matrix, which is they're struggling with email prioritization because they're just inundated with number of emails that come in, and then Matrix help you prioritize that email. And so in that particular case, Matrix grab that email and puts it here for you in the resources section to give you that context. So that's what an item details is. And so that's what all the information that you can put into a task. Now let's talk about projects, because again, think about projects as a way to organize all these 4 different quadrants, right? And Matrix is ultra flexible. And what that means is that you can use it to manage every aspect of your work. And so there's nothing that Matrix can't handle from the perspective of work. So let me show you how to create a project. So the way to do it is you click on this projects list. You can go and choose create project. And when you choose to create a project, you have several options. The first is, of course, a blank project. And so what a blank project is, you start with a matrix. I'm going to show you here, blank matrix. Okay, and then you can choose a color, and you can go ahead and add project. So you see how it's very, very simple. It's a project. You can open it, and it uses the do now, do later, delegate, postpone as the basic template. From here, of course, earlier I call it blank matrix, but you can change the project name. And to get to this list, this is called the project details. You simply click on this eye icon here, which is the edit project view. And so this is now called the project details. Down here, you can choose the members that's inside the project. And so the way permission works in Matrix is every project starts out, for example, if you created it, then you're in it. And then you can choose additional people who belongs in here, right? So for example, if I want additional coworkers inside here, if I do that, they'll get an invitation to join this project. And when they're in this project, they can see all my tasks, all my priorities and so forth. And they can also move things around as needed. So if you were to create a project for your team priorities, right, it'd be perfect to invite your manager, or if you were managing a team, it'd be perfect to invite all your direct reports. So now you have one single place, one single matrix where everyone can go in and see what your team priorities are, right? Your department priorities or your initiative priorities. And so down below that, you can actually customize the quadrant names too. This is the cool part. It turns out that if you use the matrix format, there's so many more ways to visualize the data than just the Eisenhower matrix. And so that's one of the things that we recognize is that as long as you can think about the different dimensions that are important. So for example, impact, effort, right? What are the tasks that have the highest impact with the least effort? Or what are the tasks that are high effort, high impact? And what are the tasks that are low effort, low impact? And so you can think of it as long as you have multiple dimensions, you can use Matrix to actually build out projects around each of those. And so Matrix lets you customize all of these. You can click on that and change the color as well. Now, let me show you the other types of project that we have. So I'm going to go back to the list, create project here. Now, I showed you the blank project. Matrix also has the ability for you to choose from public templates. So what are public templates? These are essentially templates that we've created, and we're just sharing with you. You can use it for whatever purpose that you need. For example, the Eisenhower Matrix is here, but then there's also the 30, 60, 90-day plan for manager and so forth. The neat thing about this is that many people, many very, very smart people have spent a lot of time thinking about how to organize information. And so all we're doing is actually we're making these various types of matrices customizable, so then you can customize it to the way that you need. If you read a book and you find some different ways to prioritize your time and you're like, oh, I should actually create a project that uses those naming convention, that's what Party Matrix allows you to do. But we have several hundred types of templates available. And so you see here in the public template list, this is just an example of them, but keep in mind that Party Matrix is infinitely flexible for that purpose. Now, what's neat too is that actually once you create your own matrix for yourself or your organization, you can actually save it as well. And then you can launch from what's called your template. So what you can save a specific version of the Party Matrix. And then from there, when you create a project, you can choose from those templates. So you see a couple of examples I have here. For example, employee onboarding. Let's just say that at your organization, you have a very specific purpose for employee onboarding. And that could be, the 13 things they have to do within the first 2 weeks, and then the stuff that they have to do within a quarter or 2 quarters, et cetera. Once you create that matrix and all the tasks in it, you can choose to save it as a template. What's neat is that then you have a new employee. Instead of actually recreating all of that, you can actually just choose your employee onboarding project. You set the start date, and then all the due dates will propagate forward for you. So it will save you a ton of time down the road. And what's neat about that is that every single employee who's getting onboarded will know exactly what their priorities are, and then they have a very good system to track all the work that they need to do, and then you're not generating additional work. So you can look at your template as a way to track repeated processes. So in customer onboarding, for example, or sales team, et cetera, that you have for your enterprise customer. And then lastly, we have the ability to create project using AI. So one of the things that we realize is that we want to help you achieve your goals. And so in order to help you achieve your goals, we actually let you type in your goal and then generate a matrix with that goal, given your job title, your job function, and your industry. And so you can go ahead. I would highly recommend that you try this out after the call or during the call. But go ahead and go into your Party Matrix. When you set it up, go create a project with AI. Type in a goal that you really care about. That's the key, right? You got to do something that is truly important. And then from there, Party Matrix will actually generate the task for you that you need to work on. And so, one of the examples I always like to use is something like, how do I get a promotion from job title X to job title Y this quarter? Or how do I improve sales? Or how do I improve my organization operational efficiency? So play with that, because I think that there's a lot of cool things that Party Matrix can do for you there. So now let me go back to the list of projects here. And so you can see that in my project, I can jump to any of these projects, and I have created several types of projects before. And when I go to this project list, everything is color coded. It's very easy for me to see and organize information. Now let me switch gear a little bit and talk about email prioritization. So if you use Outlook, you can go ahead and go to the App Store, choose Party Matrix, and then once you choose Party Matrix, it'll be installed as part of your app add-in. And what happens is when you have an email, Instead of actually just flagging the email, you can actually turn them into tasks. And this is, by the way, this is something that I'm at fault with too. Because I get so many emails, what happens is if I just flag an email and I don't set a due date, I will forget it, right? And that's because, if I have 5 flag emails, that's great. I can look at 5 flag emails. That's easy. I know exactly what to answer. But if I have 50 flag emails or 100 flag emails, it becomes extremely difficult to actually go back and determine what email I actually need to respond to. So the way Matrix works is I can turn any email into tasks. So if I click on the apps here, choose Matrix, and I can choose the option to prioritize email. So what this does is it takes the email and creates a task in Matrix. And so you can see that it takes the subject to create the item name. I can customize this as needed. I can choose what project it goes in, and I can choose what quadrant it goes in. And then there's a couple cool things that Matrix allows you to do, which is I can now delegate this email to somebody else, right? Of course, it defaults to me. So when I prioritize an email, maybe I have to answer it. But then imagine if I'm in customer success or I'm in sales and I need to delegate it to engineering or somebody else, I can actually do that delegation directly from Outlook. Then I can go ahead and set a due date, and I can set effort. So the way it works is Matrix extract the text from the email here and put it in the notes section. Now, when you click capture email, so I'll show you how that works, what happens is it turns that email into a task. And so now you can see that this looks like just like the item details that I showed you earlier. Again, I can go and I can see the task name, I can edit it, I can change and move it to different project as needed, I can star it, and then of course I can assign somebody else and set reminders and so forth. But if I go to the resources section, you can see that the email is uploaded as an email file. And then what happens is if you delegate this to a coworker, they can actually go into their Matrix. In the resources section, they'll see the email. They can click the email and it'll open the email and it lets them respond to the customer. So it is so helpful from the perspective of delegation and email prioritization when you need to actually involve multiple people at any point in time with Matrix. Now, let me give you a reason why this is far more valuable than just forwarding an email or creating a chain of emails. Let's just say you get an email from a customer, and now you need to, again, delegate to somebody else. So the current way is you could go and you could forward that email and then CC a couple people, right? And now you have a conversation in there and people are sending messages back and forth. The problem is there's no clear due date on something like that. The second problem is when there's a status update to that task, how do you know? Is it done? You have to go back to that email to review it, right? And then not only that, you have to read through all the conversation history to understand the progress made and all these other conversations. So the way Matrix works is when you take an email and you convert it into a task, you now have one central place to track all of that. And as you can see, when I was here and I'm creating this task from an email, Matrix automatically detect whether or not this is already duplicated. So if you have multiple coworkers that CC'd on an email and one of them create the task, right, and you're already on that list, well, when you go here and you create try to create a task, Matrix will alert you and say, hey, by the way, we already have this task. So maybe you want to review it first so then you don't actually duplicate the task. Now, here's another scenario where Matrix is actually really helpful, which is imagine if you get a follow-up email, right? This is where things get really challenging because you have that first email, you have a whole thread around it. Now you have a second email. And what you're trying to do is you're actually trying to have it all in one central place. So what Matrix allows you to do is this. When I go to have an email, and what I want to do instead is I want to attach this email to an existing task. So I click on Matrix, I open up Matrix, and instead of creating a whole new task, I can actually search Matrix for that item name and then hover over that task and then attach this email to an existing task. So now what you pretty much have done is you create one task, a central place to capture all these emails and all these files and documents and so forth. And you have it all in one central place and there's one single source of truth and everyone knows what it is they need to work on. So that email prioritization aspect inside Matrix is really, really powerful. Now, a couple of other things that's neat too is in Matrix, you have what's called an inbox address. So for example, if you go back to Matrix, click on inbox, there's something called a secret inbox address. This is an email address where if you send an email to this address, it will create a task in Matrix for you. So what that allows you to do is if you have an email, you can also forward that email into Matrix and it'll show up in the inbox. And then from the inbox, you can move it to another project. So I use this feature all the time as well, especially when I'm on mobile. So when I'm on the road, I get an email. It's a little bit, while we have integration inside Outlook for mobile, what happens is when I'm on my phone, it's usually an Apple Mail. So what I do instead then is I just forward that email into Matrix, allowing me to create a task from any email, no matter where I am. And then what's nice about it is that Matrix uses that natural language. And so when I forward an email in the body, I just say due tomorrow or remind me daily. And what that allows me to do is actually create reminders as well as due dates directly from my forwarded email. I can even assign it to people too. So I can assign and then assign to and then my coworker name. And Matrix will actually create the task and assign it to the person. So that's a really cool capability. That's called the secret inbox. Turns out Matrix also creates an email for every single one of your projects. So you can come up with really creative ways to actually use our email capabilities. Now, let me jump to Microsoft Teams. One thing I want to mention real quick is that you don't need Microsoft Teams. You don't need Outlook to use Matrix. You saw how I use the web app, and actually I can create all those tasks and all those priorities. But if you do use Microsoft Teams, I highly recommend that you install Matrix from Microsoft Teams because it helps with that context switching problem that I mentioned earlier. You go to the App Store, install Matrix, and then afterwards right-click on here and pin. So after you pin Matrix, it actually stays here on the left-hand side, allowing you to access the whole Matrix really easily. So you can see here, I am inside Microsoft Teams, but I can access my Matrix. And so I have my 4 quadrants, I have my task, I have my list of projects, and I can access and jump between them very, very easily. If I want to create a new project, I click up here and choose create project if needed. And then not only that, I have this home view. And the way the home view works, if I click on it, is that actually this is where I can see all my alerts. Earlier, I mentioned how the whole goal of Matrix is to help you work on the right things, right? And as I mentioned, if you set reminders and due dates, Matrix will send you those alerts. Well, here's where they come in the home view. So I have 33 here. That means these are the things that I actually have to look at. And then from these tasks, I can click through them and see what are the things that's relevant. What are these are the updates that requires my attention. So what are the kind of updates that will show up here? For example, a task that you got delegated. So somebody delegated you a task, or a task that you delegated to somebody that's been updated, or your due dates or your reminders triggers, right? And so those are the things that shows up in your alert. And so some people actually love the idea of inbox zero, which means you've cleared out everything you have to work on. And so for me, when I start my day with Matrix, this is where I go. I go to the alert section. I look at everything that's relevant to me, right? Again, I can see my avatar here. These are the tasks that are assigned to me that's relevant. Probably someone updated it or a due date. Or I can actually see also other tasks other people own that got updated. And so I can go through that list. And then once I'm done, or if I no longer want to go through the rest of the list, I can actually go here and clear all notifications or clear anything that's older than a week or a day. An example of why you want to clear things older than a week is if you were on vacation, right? If you're on vacation, you come back, you're going to have 1,000 notifications in Matrix. And so when you clear all things older than a week, then it'll put you on a blank slate. And that is why I recommend using the recurring reminders. So the whole point of the recurring reminders is that after you clear it, and if it's still an open task, it'll come back up to you in the alert section, right? And this is where it's that constant nagging that is extremely helpful to ensure that you work on the right things. It's a trick. At the end of the day, it's a trick on your brain. So then you actually spend your time on the tasks that matter. And so that trick is to ensure that your most important tasks are constantly reminded. So I love doing the remind me daily, remind me weekly aspect of Matrix. And so I recommend that you do as well. Okay, now let me show you a couple features inside Teams that's actually really unique. So if you go to a chat section with somebody inside Teams, and so imagine if you work with 5 or 10 people constantly, right? And you have a chat with them all the time, you can go to what's called the one-on-one view inside a Teams chat and see every task you have with them across all of Protomatrix. So the way Protomatrix works is we have this thing called the one-on-one view. And with the one-on-one view, you select the person, right? So like that person would be the person that you chat with here. And then Protomatrix takes everything you have across all your Protomatrix and bring it to one central view, regardless of the project. This view is so helpful if you have people that report to you, right? If you go to this view, you can go through each of your direct report and see exactly what are the tasks of all the people that your direct report is working on. And it's also really easy to see the tasks that are overdue as well. I can click on this due and actually can sort them. And I can say, okay, I see all these tasks that are red that are overdue. Let's talk about them, or let's change the due dates, or whatever it is. And so it is so helpful because you don't have to open per matrix. You don't have to go through every single project. You don't have to go and search through every single task. You have it in one central place. So the way that you get to this one-on-one view is you click on this plus icon here, and then you choose Party Matrix, and then you choose the one-on-one view, and you choose the collaborator. And so if you use Microsoft Teams, I highly recommend that you go and add this one-on-one view with every single one of your coworker. And now you can go in that central place to see all the tasks. The other neat reason why this view is so powerful is you have the ability to add share tasks directly from here. So if you're in a meeting with your direct report and you want to assign them a task, you don't have to go into Protomatrix and select a project. You just open the one-on-one view, click on Add Share Task, and then create the task directly here. And so I recommend, again, to set the due date directly in the task name itself, but it automatically assigns it to your coworker and automatically add you as a follower. So then when this task gets updated or finished, you get notified. And you can choose what project it goes in directly from here. Save you a bunch of time having to, switch context, go to another app or go to your browser, finding the right project and adding the task in the specific quadrants and so forth. So definitely leverage this capability if this is relevant to your workflow. The other thing Matrix allows you to do as well is that you can actually turn any conversation into a task. So if you're talking to somebody and then you guys come up with action items that you need to work on, just click on this ellipsis, choose create PM item, and voila, everything that you have, whatever conversation that you have can be converted into a task directly from this view. And as you can see, I actually have sent Party Matrix tasks as well in the chat. And the way you do that is you go down here, choose Party Matrix, and then select the task that you want to send. The reason I use this sometimes, by the way, is if I assign someone a task and then I see that they haven't made progress on it, and so then I want to raise to their attention. So I go here, select the task from Party Matrix, and send it to them so they can go and take a look at it and open it as needed. Now, as I mentioned, we have so many more capabilities and integrations into the Microsoft Teams as well as the Microsoft ecosystem in general. For example, we have what's called workflow integrations, where you can do automations. We have Power Apps integrations. We have Microsoft Graph integrations, and then we have these exciting Copilot integrations that actually was just announced by the Microsoft CEO. So if you're looking to expand your integrations and usage of the Microsoft capabilities along with Matrix, and you have questions, reach out to us. We'd be happy to show you that for the enterprise customers as well. So with that, what I want to do is I'm going to go back to the presentation, and I'm going to wrap this up and try to answer the questions, any questions you may have. So if you haven't already signed up for a Matrix, definitely sign up for the Matrix. And if you use Teams and Outlook, definitely install the application. My advice, create at least 3 projects, your personal priorities, right? These are the things that you care about. Share team priorities. This is invite your coworkers on it so then everyone can be on the same page. And then a key initiative. So it's something that, a project or whatever it is that you work on. The reason is that if you have a key initiative project in Matrix, you'll go back to it, you'll update it, and you'll see what are the priorities that to work on. And then invite the appropriate team members. And then the other thing that's not so obvious is you have to show people your priorities. That's the key, by the way. If you show your manager your priorities using Matrix, it's going to help them understand what it is that you're working on. And then vice versa, if you show your coworkers your priorities, it'll help them understand what it is that you're working on. And so one of the things that I think happens more way too often is that we're overwhelmed with work, right? We're constantly assigned things over and over again. There's never it's never ending. And so if you can show others what your priorities are, then you can say, by the way, if you assign me this new task, I got to drop something. What do you want me to drop? And that Pretty Matrix helps you convey that. Always create Pretty Matrix items with due dates, and then always put them in the appropriate quadrants, and then make sure that you mark them as done. So I say that because I think setting the due date in Pretty Matrix makes it so powerful, because it adds that dimensions of importance and urgency, right? Because the matrix view is helpful, but the urgency aspect of it is a way to hack your brain into knowing what it is you need to work on. And then the last part is I ruthlessly prioritize. The reason I say that is because if you don't prioritize your task, somebody will. If you don't prioritize your time, somebody else will. And so keep that in mind as you use Pretty Matrix. A couple of advice. If you are concerned about getting overwhelmed, use Pretty Matrix to track only high impact tasks. Don't use it for your grocery list. Use it just to ensure that you're working on the right things on a monthly or quarterly basis. And then use it as a communication tool. Pretty Matrix is not just a project management software or a task management software. It helps create clarity. And then I always want to emphasize how you can use it for your individual goals. Party Matrix started out as a way for individuals to manage their priorities. And so the software has existed for more than a decade. And we started out, our roots is in helping individuals, the managers, understand how and what it is they need to work on. And so all the aspect around team management and so forth comes after that. So if you can use it to manage your goals and you're successful there, everything else will come together. So hopefully you have an understanding on what Protomatrix can do. And so success with Protomatrix then would look like this. One, you have a central place to track all your priorities. Everyone on your team understands and are aligned on the key task. And if you have repetitive procedures, templatize them. And then if you have important emails, that you're prioritizing them and delegating them. And so if this is what you can potentially achieve if you actually leverage Protomatrix. And with that, I conclude my presentation here. I'm going to look at the chat now inside Teams to see if there's any questions. And so if you could, if there's any other questions, please send in the message here and I'll take a look and I'll try my best to address them. So I see a questions around this schedule. So the question is, can I use this in a classroom environment so then I can help students with time management? That's actually really interesting. So I guess the question here is, what are the students' education level? Are they college students or are they high school students, et cetera? So the way it works with Protomatrix is that if you want to use it in a classroom environment and you want to just convey it on a screen, for example. So let's just say if you have a matrix in Protomatrix and say these are the skills that I want you to learn and take away, right? During this course, during this quarter or semester, and then you put that in the matrix, and then you have some sort of dimensions there, so then the students can look at it and they understand, okay, these are what I need to learn and so forth. I think that could be helpful. If you want to help the students actually manage their task, what you could potentially do is you could create a matrix with all the things that they would learn this quarter and export it as a Protomatrix P-matrix file. And then every student can actually import that into their own Protomatrix. And so it's a way to share templates, actually. So Protomatrix has a type of file called a P-matrix file that includes all the tasks as well as all the due dates and so forth. And so imagine every single quarter when you have a class, you send them this list and say, hey, by the way, if you're interested in being on top of all the things that we're going to be working on, that could be an approach. So if you have any additional questions around that, feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to brainstorm ways around helping your students prioritize their time. Fantastic. Are there any other questions here? I see a question. I could not find this. Could you elaborate on that? Are you not able to find it inside Microsoft Teams or Outlook or something like that? So in some cases, you might have to ask IT to approve our application. It typically is already approved because of the Microsoft 365 security certifications. Okay, so if you're not able to find in Teams, then you might have to reach out to your IT. Usually, if you search for Prioritization in Teams, there's an option to say request. If you can't add it right away, you can request it. And if you request it, then IT can actually approve it for you. So some organizations have that additional lockdown, but again, Matrix should have that security checkbox next to it. And so that security checkbox means that, again, Microsoft has done security certification with our software and should be pretty straightforward to approve. Is there a manual that I should be able to follow? That's a good question. So we actually are building a whole suite of manual for every single use case that you have. So if you reach out to us with your job function and then your goals with Matrix, we actually will be able to send you a guide on how to best use Matrix, some best practices. So send it to support@affluence.com and we'd be happy to take a look. If you could send it through support, then we can actually, someone can actually respond to you with the guide. Yes, support@affluence.com. Perfect. Fantastic. Are there any other questions? So feel free to reach out to me, Hyatt Affluence, at any point in time if you have questions. Our goal here is to ensure that Party Matrix is helpful to you in terms of prioritizing and tracking the key tasks that you have. The the thing that really truly matters is that you use Party Matrix to track those key tasks. And so hopefully from today's webinar, you see the capabilities that's out there, that's inside the system, and hopefully you have an understanding of what capabilities you should use. Thank you all. I appreciate your time.